I'm here today to discuss about Agile and InnerSource, and we've already seen some discussions on the topic in previous talks. So let's say I'm not an expert in Agile, so this is mostly a way to receive feedback to this conversation, because I'm looking at this discussion using 2 or 3 hats. Basically, one of those is I'm the president of InnerSource Commons, so I'm interested basically in how can we reach out to other communities. Then I'm playing the role of consultant as well as a CEO of Bitergia, where we are providing InnerSource services and consultancy and monitoring platform. And it's basically, where do we start? So this is our way of working nowadays in this company. So then what is an easy approach? And then I'm part of a couple of extra foundations from an InnerSource, from an open source perspective. Let me say this, right? So Agile might be de facto way of developing software, or at least it's part of the wish list of organizations nowadays. Like, okay, we should be there. Everyone is doing this. And then according to different surveys, and specifically this digital AI survey, 42 respondents, they use a hybrid model. So basically they are bringing together other methodologies, other engineering approaches, and so on, for instance, DevOps. We've been discussing this couple of days on this hype cycle, right? For specifically, I'm bringing today the 2023 that Russ mentioned this morning. And basically, InnerSource keeps going up. So InnerSource was listed as 2023 Gartner's top 6 strategic technology trends for software engineering. And it happens that InnerSource is in between. So people are basically applying, yes, Agile, and probably they are trying to do DevOps, and they are trying to do InnerSource, and they are trying to do engineering platform. So they are trying to do many things and trying to see what works in our specific case. Reviewing a bit what people think and organizations specifically think about doing InnerSource. So this is part of the 2023 State of the InnerSource survey. There are all of these motivations, right? So we have knowledge sharing, remove silos and bottlenecks, creating reusable software, increase developer speed, innovation, improve code quality. So there are many of them. If we think this, or we look at this from an InnerSource perspective, this is, yes, InnerSource. But if we look at this from an Agile perspective, some of those, or most of them, apply as well, right? So then the question here is, how can we work together, and if Agile and InnerSource are complementary? So my personal opinion is yes. And then I've been specifically applying this in some customers when growing InnerSource initiatives here and there. So the initial answer is yes, they are complementary. Going into the principles, so we can say on the left, you can see the InnerSource principles. So we have communications, transparency, collaboration, community, meritocracy. And then there are some Agile manifesto values. There are some Scrum pillars, and then some Scrum values. Again, I'm not expert here, so if you have any feedback, would be super great to have on the table. This specific slide and some of the next slides are part of a discussion that we already had at the InnerSource Commons like 5 years ago in Galway. And then basically we try to link, right? So this InnerSource principle with this Agile manifesto value. So we talk about InnerSource principles with communication, and then we say in Agile, well, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, which is basically part of this cultural change, right? From transparency, there is a direct link, and then this links into openness as well. And then there is this collaboration that is partially happening, specifically in Agile. Collaboration happens between the Agile team and the customer, we can say. Collaboration from an InnerSource perspective is ideally all across the organization. I think it's worth coming back to this discussion couple of hours ago by Apostolos on basically watch out for anti-patterns. Doing in Agile, right? So waterfall Agile, Agile in name only, analysis paralysis, micromanagement. So there are some of those. And those could be seen as well in InnerSource. So guilt, you just mentioned, right? That try to make this simple, because if not, things will slow down and maybe block, and then there is friction. Basically, friction will happen, and that's a part of the discussion, right? So how can we deal with this? How can we overcome all of this? So next slides are kind of okay, this is the playground we have with InnerSource and Agile. I'm starting with communication and transparency. So when we talk about communication and transparency in an InnerSource way, we typically discuss about open communication in open teams, and then it's transparent by design. So we are opening the source code repositories to everyone within the corporation. We are making the communication transparent to everyone, right? So we are fostering collaboration by making knowledge explicit and enabling people to produce a change request and many other steps. In Agile, in this case, open communication is typically at the level of teams. So this is happening at the level of each of the Agile teams, and sometimes or typically, better said, it's hard to find information about other teams. So if I'm working in this Agile team and I want to collaborate with other Agile teams, unless this is fostered or is part of the project in somehow, there is no such access. Let's say by default and because of security, everything is closed. So you need to ask for permission, right? So there are these two friction points. From the documentation perspective, in Agile teams, I've seen once and again that most of the knowledge about development is tacit knowledge, in the sense that this is certain knowledge in how we are behaving and working or reviewing each other or working together. And that's in our heads, basically. So that's tacit knowledge. And because I'm part of the team, I know how we are proceeding. This helps to produce much faster. We're working together and in small teams. But if we think about from an InnerSource perspective, that's way harder, basically. And then if we have, so human interactions are important in both cases, but perhaps the main difference is in an InnerSource space, we try to have archivable information that we can reference afterwards. So basically, again, it's about making explicit all of this information and documentation. So moving forward and discussing about collaboration, in Agile, again, we are discussing about teams typically. So then there is full collaboration within the team, with the customer, the product owner, the different roles in the team. But InnerSource is about enabling collaboration at the level of individuals. So teams are important, but perhaps that is the line is a bit blurry, and then this collaboration is basically developer to developer. There is the concept of a trusted committer, a gatekeeper, we can say, and then there are other roles that we can see in Agile teams as well. So then we have kind of a more management-oriented units, as for instance, the InnerSource office that other people have been discussing about this. So there are different ways of approaching this from an InnerSource, let's say, perspective than from an Agile perspective. Focusing a bit more into the roles, so we can think of InnerSource. We have the trusted committer that I guess everyone is aware of this role here. We have a contributors. We have a teams that evolve in somehow based on merits. And then starting in Agile, we have the concept of a predefined and closed teams initially. We have the Scrum team. We have product owners that are still a role probably in InnerSource as well, business owners, even Epic owners. So basically the question here is how can we make this possible? And then we have the geographical distribution that I would say after pandemic is probably less important, but initially in an Agile way is in-person meetings and discussions and teams, basically physically in person and working together is quite important. And that's not a thing in InnerSource. So InnerSource is a lot about asynchronous communication. It's based on this concept of open organizations and methodology, and ideally is resilient by default, and what I say there, right? It's designed to be distributed. So, and then if we think about scaling, just to be frank here, this is something that I don't totally fully understand. This is super complex sometimes to move forward with, while InnerSource seems to provide a way easier process, methodology, and tools to make that scaling process a faster and probably more resilient. Because we are again relying on individuals that may change, turnover exists and happens, but because knowledge is all spread around the organization, then it's basically less. There are no unique and individuals that might be super critical for the organization at some point. So basically, knowledge is in different heads. And then of course, Agile world offers ways of scaling this way of working. So kind of summarizing, and then I'm entering into Agile and open source first, because this is based on this paper. There is basically certain areas where Agile and open source are in harmony according to this paper. I'm not talking now about InnerSource. And then there is some areas that are basically producing friction, right? And then we wrote a paper that will be together with Claire Dillon and Brian Fitzgerald and Izquierdo and me, myself, that will be presented in HICS 2025, in case you're in Hawaii in January. I won't be there. Where we are having this discussion. So basically, what is Agile and open source, and then now what is Agile and InnerSource. The title here is wrong. Sorry about that. And then it's basically about defining these things. So basically, there is some areas in harmony, and there are some areas that are under friction. So I'm checking now the timing. I'm initially still okay. I have 5 minutes more to go. And then I wanted to go and say, okay, all of this is good. So we have kind of a list of things that are, or principles that are working in InnerSource, principles that are working in Agile. So now what's next, right? And this is part of the discussion for the last part of this presentation, which is basically where to start. So if we think about the friction, these are examples that we've been using specifically when trying to foster InnerSource within Agile teams. And again, it's what Gil said before, is try to start small, simple, something that people can use and consume. And try to move that forward, basically removing and polishing the friction step by step. So if we think about the communication mode, so what if in our Agile way of working, we start using publicly available channels? So then instead of having, closed communication and everything, we start using public channels so everyone in the corporation could join. And then we move discussions there. So basically it's about openly discussing and moving what might be a coffee chat discussion into that public channel. That's a small step, but it's basically a big difference in how people are communicating. For the location of developers, try to force working with remote developers. And this is probably easier these days because of the pandemic. So then this kind of working maybe hybrid or half remotely or so, that's already happening. And this is making teams more resilient because we are able to move people from one team to the other, right? So by just bringing one new person to the Agile team, you are forcing that team to behave in a different way because you need to onboard that person that is working remotely. And that will take time. You are forcing to start making, certain tacit knowledge more explicit to everyone. If we think about the development size, you don't have to stop working in an Agile way. But the idea is that you allow paths, you enable outsiders to contribute if needed, only if they want. So that means basically that you need to enable people to send a pull request or a change request at some point. And for this, you need to provide a specific documentation in place. And probably you need to get ready with the code at some point, modularization, etc., etc. This will allow to, you keep working in an Agile way, producing, being really productive. But then at the same time, you are perhaps from time to time allowing others to come and without having certain consensus, they may fix provide feedback or allow certain discussions on part of the backlog that you already have. That, by the way, should be public in the public communication channels. So we are changing the communication mode. Again, this is a small change, small in the sense of you are simply allowing external contributions at some point in your agile way of working. So typically for instance, at the beginning of each sprint, you will say, well, let's review the backlog. Do we have a new external pull request? No. Okay, so then this is our sprint for these 2 weeks. And then if not, we can basically bring that review process in place. Then moving forward, the role of customer. Probably we should think about growing the customer population. And now we don't only have, perhaps our main customer is our product owner or our customer that we are working with directly, but we may have others. So basically, it's about having in our minds that potentially anyone in the corporation can be our customer. And that's pretty good, because then you need to start thinking in a different way about how to approach that. So we need to bring other people to have consensus on how to move forward and what is basically a core feature or a core new functionality that should be part of the project. And this is bringing, at the same time, diversity to the project, so then innovation may happen at some point. And finally, continuous integration. We claim this in the paper, but I think CI/CD tools are becoming more standard. I have a typo there, sorry about that, but are becoming standard everywhere and in the industry, enforcing software engineering practices from the very beginning is probably a good thing in any case to happen. So that's not a problem. Let's say that the lower the cost of adoption for this project, the easier will be for others to be part of the discussion from an InnerSource perspective. So this has been basically my talk for today. So then I'll you back the microphone. So thank you for your time.